One moment. Oswald, what have I told you about leaving your crappy AOR CDs in my player? We don't listen to AOR, we only listen to rock and roll or heavy metal in this studio. Anyway, welcome to the second of the Slipknot series. And this week, I know it's been a while since the last one, we're going to paint Mick Thomson. And we're going to use, this time, instead of white, we're going to use a grey shirt. And before I start, I'm just going to briefly talk about what airbrushes I use, because people email and say, what gear are you using? Well, for years I've been using this airbrush, which is the Vega 2000 by Thayer and Chandler. The logo's there. But more recently, I've been thinking about switching to the Badger 150 Anthem, simply because it's a very similar airbrush, and you can see they're almost identical proportions. In fact, they are identical. So I'm going to make a video shortly and do a direct comparison of these two, and we'll see how they compare. The most innovative thing they've come up with is this system for, like, the air's on now, but I can do a quick change from one airbrush like that. I've got air. I'm not switching the air off. I'm using the quick change system, unplugging the Vega, and then I'm plugging in the Badger 155 like so, and I can do a quick change between the two, so that's very useful. I'll just point out that when you buy your Badger or your Vega 3000, it comes like that, like a long pen. But what I tend to do is, I know that you've got the cutaway to pull back to clear the nozzle, but I tend to remove that and then paint using it like so, you know, and then add the paint bottle like that. And I know it looks ungainly, but I'm kind of used to that. Whereupon the Badger has got a heavier tailpiece, which is more balanced. We're going to talk about that in the other video. But in this video, we're going to do the Slipknot Mick Taylor stencil. Okay, let's begin. Right. Okay, as I said, we're not using a white T-shirt. We're using a zinc grey T-shirt. And working from this image, make yourself a big stencil like so. Now it ends quite high, but we can improvise this because hair begins about there. And lay it on central, kind of that position, plenty of space at the top, and then begin with the black. I'll just point out before we start, the eyepiece, I say piece of masking, is connected to this with this section. And I've left that piece in there, which is a reflected light, and the same the other side. But that will become clear when I start painting. Alright, so begin with black. The other eye. Okay, these slots here, I say slots, the slots I've cut are these divisions between the forms of the mask. So I'm going to put them in as simple lines and shapes, and then we'll talk about the mouth area and these slots in this kind of portcullis section at the front. Okay, so again, just fill in black for the nostrils, the shadow area under the nose. There's a line there, a line there, a line there, a line there. Now, this section, don't fill it with solid black. It's like dark at the top and dark on the left hand edge. and then the outer perimeter of the mask. That will fade to black, and then the right hand side, do the same again. Black kind of fade towards the right hand edge. Pause it. Okay, fill in the outside, and then when you get to the mouth, where the two lips meet, I've cut a slit there to remind me when I take the mask away where that point is, and I've marked in a couple of lines. But the top areas, top 5 sort of lollipop stick shapes, just make them solid black like so. And then put the division in there, section in there. I'm making this a bit darker because that's where the mouth's turning down at the corner. And again at the bottom, these 3 points, make them black at the bottom and then fade lighter to the top. So when you take the mask away, it'll make sense. Okay. Then you do the reveal and you're left with this. Now, it looks like a bit of a chaotic mess at first, but don't panic because we'll sort that out. Firstly, let's fill in these sections that were left when we've taken the stencil away from the eye. So I'll fill in the top bit like so. And this is very similar to the Gene Simmons one we've done previously. And then, because the stencil ended there, you can carry on that shape and bring that round to complete the eye shape. Don't worry about being too accurate at this stage because that's just a blackened shadow area. Okay. Now, when we look at the eyes, you'll notice they're blue, and the rest of the shirt is essentially like a metallic grey or silver. So what we've got to do in a while, we'll mix up a sort of a light blue, and we'll paint that on with a brush. And that's the only bit of colour we're going to have on the entire shirt. But we'll do that in a short while. But in the meantime, I'm going to draw in the semicircle that I've marked on the stencil. I've marked the stencil, and if you notice, I've cut 2 little slits, top and bottom, and they come out like that. And that reminds me where the start and the end of the iris are. And that just makes it easier when you're doing the stencil and you haven't picked it up for a while. So, like so. Then put the dot in the middle. Okay, then the underside. But because there's some reflected light, don't go right in, but just suggest it like that. And then we'll leave this section kind of pale at the moment, and then fill in the negative area, which is this bit. Okay, that's looking better. It's still crude, but we'll refine it as we go along, and do the same with the other eye. The only difference being there's a bit of white space on the right hand side of the iris there, but on this side there isn't. So just remember, they're not identical, they're not a mirror image. Put it that way. Okay, when you've done the eyes, we'll concentrate on the nose, and it's more about the structure. Now if you look at the stencil, I've marked on a line there where the nose changes direction, and these pieces, and these two linear points coming down. So what we'll do, staying close to the stencil, we'll start to block that stuff in. So we'll put the line across the nose, we'll gently dust in a bit of tone, and just start to suggest the form, and then this line coming down here. And then the left hand edge. Comes to the mouth, what we do first of all is connect up these lines to make the grill section. So just fill it in gently. Do it by hand. I wouldn't use a straight edge because it might be too, you know, too rigid. You want a kind of loose feel, because that isn't actually cut square. It's kind of a bit raggedy around the edges. And then we can see where the lips are made. We've got to suggest then the shadow under the bottom lip, which is approximately there, and then follow it through to the next one, the next segment. But obviously it curls up. And then it's completely black in the third section, so that's about right. Then the other side, I've cut a bit of a slit there to remind me, but I've got to feather that in with a bit of facial hair, bit of beard, like so. And I'll make the bottom black, because I know there's nothing there apart from shadow. And once you start to put these sections in, you get more form and you can start to see what's going on. You know, if you take an overview, it's starting to shape up a bit now. There's obviously lots of tone to put in, and there's still some lines missing. For this line here, I've got to complete that line, which it's point there to there. So it's kind of just a matter of filling it in. And again, it's not a straight line. It's a straight line, but it's not a line as drawn with a ruler. So don't worry if your lines are a bit off, because that kind of works. It adds to the, you know, the flexibility, because these masks are actually made of rubber. They look like metal, but they're made of silicone rubber. So, you know, there's a bit of leeway with the flexibility. I'll put that line there. That's hidden by the hair. There's a hair strand comes down, and there's another line from there to there. I think so. There's a point change there. And then once you start to get all the sections in, that point lines up with that point there to there. So the other side, and follow this back up to the top. Because each segment is where a different plane interacts with another plane. And that sounds complicated, but there's a simple geometry to the face. Those nose sections relate to that oblong section there. These cheekbone sections, and this comes into the jawline section. You've got to keep the sections geometric, and then as the light hits the geometric shapes, that describes the form. And if you don't get that right, it won't look right. So try and keep it as it is in the photograph, but at the same time understand the form, so that you can kind of add a bit of your own personality to it, if you see what I mean. Okay, let's just add a bit more tone now. I'm going to add some hair. Because the hair is like an organic form, contrasting with the rigid geometry of the face, the mask, you know. So it's quite an interesting juxtaposition. Okay, and when you get to that kind of section, you've basically done the bottom 2/3. We need to sort out what's happening at the top, because the mask kind of fades away at that kind of angle, and then there's a strand of hair. We'll drop that in because that makes it a bit more interesting, breaks up the symmetry. So we'll go from this point there and take it round to the right, just kind of like that, fade it away. And a bit of hair, and the same the other side. And like I said, we'll draw the strand of hair that passes to the right of the eye. So we'll do kind of strand of hair like that. And there's more than one, it's not just one strand, it's like a group of hairs. Okay, and then we'll add some hair there. But I've noticed at the edge of the eye socket part of the mask, there's a bit of shadow there, so drop that in. And that suggests the edge of the mask. And make this section black, because that's a deep shadow. And that'll give you image, form and depth. Same with this section here, fill this right in. Then we'll quickly mix up a bit of blue with a brush and fill in the eyes so it can carry on. Okay. So mix up a light blue using just an opaque white, and I'm using a Spectra blue from the Badger range. It's the 55-122 Royal Blue. So mix that up with some white till you get the right shade of blue you want. And people ask me why I use a paintbrush and not an airbrush, and quite honestly it's simply because if I want a nice opaque colour that's white based, I will use a paintbrush because it just goes on in one coat and then I can carry on. If I airbrushed it, sometimes you have to do it 2 or 3 times, and it's just, sometimes it's more trouble than it's worth to airbrush things on. Okay, and then the other eye. because the airbrush is an incredible tool for blending and doing soft edges. But sometimes when you just want to block in some solid body colour, you know, you can't beat a paintbrush. That's not to say the airbrush isn't the best tool. I mean, 99% of this shirt is done with an airbrush. Not to put the airbrush down. And down a quick drop, a quick dot in the eye to bring the eyes to life. I've just remembered that the whites of the eyes are literally, they need to be white, not grey of the shirt. So while you've got the white out, again, fill that section in like so. I mean, if you're more comfortable airbrushing white, go ahead and do so, you know. And the other eye. And then there's a tiny bit of white in the inside of the eye, but only on the left hand eye. Okay, like I did on the Gene Simmons video and all the other previous videos, I like to use a bit of dry brushing, simply because you pick up the texture of the shirt, and that is a technique I just always find very comfortable to use. It's a different texture that brings a different element in and gives your eye something to look at. Okay, I've changed to a sepia brown, and we're going to suggest some colour behind the lips and around the lips. So, okay, that's really it, all you need. And I need to add a touch of red, really, which I'll do in a second. Red. Stop. Okay, I know I said I used a lot of white with a brush, but when I want to put these highlights in, I use the airbrush paint. I'm using Spectra textile paint, and it's, if you're interested, it's the intense white, and it's 55/-145 OP for opaque, I assume. It's also Blanco Intenso Opaso in white. It's a really good white that sprays, because if you do any airbrushing, you probably are aware that the main problem is getting tip build up, and white is probably the worst colour for doing, for tip build, for tip problems. And I say Badger developed this one, and it's pretty good. So what I'm doing now, to go back to the artwork, is I'm putting highlights on the grey to suggest texture. So like, for example, on the brow, it's pitted. So I'm using the white in a random pattern to break up the uniform look, because the airbrush gives you a very smooth look, and what you actually want with this is to put texture back into the smooth areas. So, for example, there are highlighted areas and then there are textured highlighted areas, so that's what I'm trying to balance out now. I'll go back with the black in a while and just damp it down again if it gets a bit too chalky. Okay, that's more or less it. So it's quite a difficult shirt, this one, compared to the Kiss shirt. It's a bit more involved with the textures and everything. So I'd say it was intermediate to sort of difficult. But of course, if you're just watching this for the pure enjoyment of watching and you wish to buy the shirt, you can buy it from my eBay shop, Nick Smith World, at ebay.co.uk, and it's there with the Corey Taylor one as well. So I hope you enjoyed watching the videos, and we'll see you on the next one, which will be very soon indeed. Bye, thanks for watching.